There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the eyes of the soul at last open upon a truth that the waking mind has been avoiding for years. Perhaps for a lifetime, it is as if in a dimly lit corridor of dreams you discover a door you have always sensed but never dared to touch. To see the narcissist for who they are, after seasons of confusion and longing, is not a simple act of recognition, but a profound psychological event, a rite of passage for the empath, and indeed for the evolving soul itself. It is here, at the intersection of light and shadow, that the empath's journey toward individuation enters its most tumultuous and transformative phase. Let us linger for a moment on the architecture of this encounter, for it is not constructed merely from the visible stones of behavior and words, but from the secret mortar of the unconscious. The empath, by nature, moves through life with a heightened sensitivity, a capacity to feel into the wounds of others, to carry burdens that are not their own, and to seek, often unconsciously, the redemption of suffering that they themselves have known. They are, in this sense, the inheritors of the archetype of the wounded healer, whose compassion is both their blessing and their cross. The narcissist, by contrast, wears the mask of grandiosity, a fragile construct designed to conceal a profound hollowness, a wound so deep that the only recourse is to construct a palace of mirrors and illusions in which they themselves are both king and captive. But what is it that draws these two souls together? Is it mere misfortune, a tragic accident of fate? Or is there, beneath the apparent randomness, a deeper choreography, a dance of archetypes playing out on the stage of the unconscious? In my years of study and analysis, I have seen countless variations of this drama. The sensitive, open-hearted one who finds themselves inexorably drawn to the one who cannot love except as an extension of their own ego. The empath, yearning for intimacy and healing, gravitates toward the narcissist, whose hunger for adoration and validation is insatiable. The result is not a partnership, but a collision, a sacred wound reenacted, a mythological encounter whose purpose, though obscured by suffering, is nothing less than the awakening of the soul. In the beginning, the empath does not see the narcissist as they truly are. Instead, they behold a projection, a figure who seems at first so luminous, so full of potential and depth, that the empath's heart is compelled to surrender. This is not naivety, but the operation of the archetypal imagination. The empath perceives in the narcissist a reflection of their own longing for wholeness. They mistake charisma for substance, intensity for intimacy, promises for presence in the realm of dreams. It is as if the empath sees a beautiful palace, one that beckons with the promise of safety and belonging, only to find, once inside, that the rooms are empty, the mirrors cracked, and the walls echo with the chill of absence. Yet it is not the narcissist alone who is to blame for this illusion. The unconscious collusion between the two is a secret covenant, a script written by the hidden hands of their mutual wounds. The empath, often shaped by early experiences of conditional love or emotional neglect, is driven by an ancient hope that if they can love enough, heal enough, or understand enough, they might finally receive the recognition and acceptance that their soul has craved since childhood. The narcissist, whose inner emptiness is unbearable, seeks a partner who will mirror their grandiosity, provide endless admiration, and absorb their pain. Each is the answer to the other's secret question. Yet neither can deliver the redemption the other unconsciously seeks. And so the cycle begins, a spiral of hope and disappointment, idealization and devaluation, closeness and abandonment. The empath gives and gives, seeking to fill the bottomless well of the narcissist's need, only to find themselves depleted, confused, and alone. The narcissist, threatened by true intimacy, recoils, withdraws, or lashes out, ensuring that the empath's love can never truly reach them. This is not merely a psychological pattern, but a symbolic enactment of the ancient drama between Eros and Thanatos, love and death, union and separation, light and shadow. The empath becomes ensnared in the labyrinth of the narcissist's psyche, wandering endlessly in search of the minotaur, the hidden core of suffering that, if faced, might finally set them free. It is important to recognize that the narcissist, too, is not merely an antagonist in this story. They are themselves possessed by an archetype, a wounded god, exiled from the kingdom of the self, doomed to wander in search of a mirror that will reflect back the grandeur they cannot find within. Their cruelty is the shadow side of their suffering. Their manipulation, a desperate plea for validation. In the mythic language of the psyche, the narcissist is both the dragon and the imprisoned prince, a creature of fire and hunger, yet also a lost soul crying out for redemption. To see this is not to excuse their harm, but to understand the deeper logic at work. Every pattern of suffering is, at its core, a call to consciousness, a summons to the work of transformation. But what, then, of the empath? What is required for the soul to awaken from this dream? To see the narcissist not as a savior or an adversary, but as a mirror of their own unconscious material. The answer is not simple, nor is it painless. To truly see is to grieve for the loss of the illusion, for the betrayal of trust, for the years spent chasing a love that could never be reciprocated. But within this grief lies a hidden gift, the dawning awareness that the wound itself is the doorway to wholeness. It is here, in the crucible of heartbreak, that the empath begins the work of reclaiming their own soul, the journey from projection to presence. From enmeshment to individuation, one cannot underestimate the power of the unconscious to resist this awakening. The ego, terrified of loss and change, clings to its narratives and defenses. It would rather remain in the familiar pain of longing than risk the unknown landscape of selfhood. In dreams, This resistance often appears as a fog or a labyrinth, a place where the dreamer wanders, confused and disoriented, unable to find the exit. Yet the presence of the labyrinth itself is a symbol of hope. It is the ancient sign that the soul is ready for transformation, that the time has come to face the Minotaur and claim the treasure that lies at the center. In my clinical practice, I have witnessed the many forms this awakening can take. Sometimes it is precipitated by a sudden crisis, a betrayal, a rupture, an act of cruelty so blatant that the illusion shatters in an instant. At other times, it is a slow dawning, a series of subtle realizations, each one chipping away at the edifice of denial until, at last, the truth stands revealed. However it unfolds, the moment is always marked by a profound ambivalence, relief mingled with terror, anger with compassion, freedom with grief. The empath, standing at the threshold of this new awareness, must decide whether to cling to the old story or step into the unknown. Let us not underestimate the courage required for this step. To see the narcissist for who they are is, in a sense, to see oneself, to acknowledge the ways in which one has been complicit in their own suffering, to confront the shadow of one's own needs and fears. This is not an act of self-blame, but of radical honesty. For the empath, the narcissist is not only a tormentor, but a teacher, a living embodiment of the soul's unintegrated aspects, the exiled parts that long for recognition and healing. To encounter the narcissist is to be initiated into the mystery of the shadow, to see, at last, that what we reject in others is often a reflection of what we have denied in ourselves. There is a certain paradox at the heart of this process. The more fiercely we resist the truth, the more tenaciously it pursues us. The unconscious, after all, is not a passive repository of forgotten memories, but an active force, a living intelligence that seeks expression in our thoughts, our dreams, our relationships. If the empath continues to deny the reality of the narcissist's nature, the pattern will repeat, growing ever more insistent, until the lesson is learned. It is as if the soul itself conspires for our awakening, arranging the circumstances of our lives so that we cannot help but confront the truth we have most feared. What, then, does it mean to truly see? It is to allow the illusion to die a small death, to be sure, but a necessary one. It is to weep for the lost dream, to mourn the love that never was, and to honor the innocence that brought us to this place. But it is also to recognize with a growing sense of wonder that the very pain we sought to avoid has become the catalyst for our transformation. In the language of alchemy, the blackening stage, the nigredo, is the prelude to rebirth. Out of the ashes of illusion, a new self begins to take shape, one that is no longer defined by the wounds of the past, but by the promise of integration and wholeness. At this stage, the work of individuation becomes not only possible, but inevitable. The empath freed from the compulsion to save or to suffer, can at last turn inward to explore the vast, uncharted territories of the psyche, to reclaim the lost parts of themselves that were projected onto the narcissist. In dreams, this may appear as a journey through a dark forest, a descent into the underworld, or an encounter with a wise old figure who offers guidance and protection. These are not mere fantasies, but the symbols through which the unconscious communicates its deepest truths. As we proceed, I invite you to consider your own journey, your own encounters with the shadow, your own longing for healing and wholeness. Perhaps you, too, have known the pain of loving a narcissist, the confusion of losing yourself in the labyrinth of another's need. If so, know that you are not alone. The path you walk is ancient, trodden by countless souls before you. It is a path of suffering, yes, but also of revelation, a journey into the heart of darkness that leads ultimately to the light. But before the light can dawn, the night must be endured. There is no shortcut, no bypass, no escape from the work of the soul. To see the narcissist for who they are is only the beginning. The real task lies ahead, the task of integrating what has been revealed, of transforming suffering into wisdom, and of forging a new relationship with oneself and with the world. This is the great work, the opus magnum of the soul, and it is available to all who are willing to enter the fire of transformation. In the next stages of our exploration, we shall venture deeper into the symbolic landscape of the empath and the narcissist, uncovering the archetypes that underlie their dance and illuminating the path from illusion to integration. For now, let us linger in the stillness of this revelation, honoring the courage it takes to see and the grace that comes when we are finally willing to awaken, to remain in this liminal space, suspended between the shattering of illusion and the promise of new clarity, is itself a task worthy of reverence. So often, in the aftermath of seeing, the soul yearns for certainty and resolution, but the psyche does not unfold in straight lines. Its growth resembles the slow spiraling of a nautilus shell, circling always around the same axis, touching each wound, each memory, each possibility again and again. This is why, when the empath finally sees the narcissist for who they are, the revelation is rarely a single flash of lightning, but a series of subtle awakenings accompanied by grief and by a curious sense of familiarity, as if some deeper part of the self has always known the truth. What then is revealed when the mask of the narcissist slips and the true face is glimpsed beneath? The first recognition is often pain, as sharp as a blade, the pain of realizing how long one has been searching for water in a desert of mirrors, how much love has been poured into a vessel that cannot hold it. Yet, with this pain comes another insight, less welcome but more necessary. The patterns that bind us are not imposed from without, but called forth from within, summoned by the unspoken stories and unmet needs of our own soul. The narcissist becomes In this sense, both adversary and oracle, a living riddle sent by the unconscious to reveal that which the waking mind would rather avoid. The ancient Greeks understood this, for they set the gods not only in the heavens, but within the human breast. Narcissus, staring endlessly into the reflection on the water, was not simply a warning against self-obsession, but a mythic image of the soul caught in the spell of its own projections. Echo, the nymph condemned to repeat the words of others, represents the empath entrapped by the narcissist's reality, losing her own voice and shape in the process. Their tragedy is our tragedy. Their fate, a warning and a map. To awaken from this enchantment is, above all, to reclaim the voice that has been lost. The empath, so attuned to the needs of the other, so skilled at reading the shifting weather of another's moods, has often neglected the quiet music of their own inner world. When the narcissist's spell is broken, there is a sudden and often terrifying silence, a space once filled by the drama of longing and loss, now empty and echoing with the question, who am I? When I am no longer consumed by the wounds of another, who am I? When the dance of giving and withholding finally ends? This question is not easily answered, for it calls us to descend into the very depths we have long avoided. In dreams, the narcissist may appear as a beautiful but dangerous figure, a seducer or a tyrant, whose presence both captivates and threatens. The empath, meanwhile, may find themselves wandering through empty rooms, searching for something unnamed and unattainable. These dream images are not random. They are the language of the soul, speaking in riddles and symbols, guiding the dreamer back to the source of their own being. In my years as an analyst, I have seen that the empath's healing begins not with the condemnation of the narcissist, but with the willingness to turn inward, to seek the roots of their own longing. This is not an act of blame, but of profound responsibility, the realization that our suffering, while inflicted by others, is also shaped by the contours of our own psyche. The narcissist, in this light, is not merely a destroyer, but a catalyst, a figure who forces us to confront the places where we have abandoned ourselves in search of love or recognition. This confrontation with the self is never easy. The shadow, that vast repository of all we cannot bear to acknowledge, rises up with ferocity. Old fears, old wounds, old shames surface, demanding to be seen and understood. For many, this period feels like a kind of psychic winter, a season of mourning and emptiness, where the world seems stripped of color and meaning. Yet it is precisely in this winter that the seeds of new life are sown, for only in the absence of illusion can the truth of the self begin to emerge. Let us look then at the symbolic meaning of the narcissist's presence in the empath's life. What archetype, what energy is being summoned by this encounter? On one level, the narcissist embodies the shadow king, the false ruler, whose authority is based not on wisdom or compassion, but on domination and illusion. For the empath, who has often denied their own power and voice. This figure is both a threat and a mirror, a living representation of the parts of themselves they have suppressed. In this way, the battle with the narcissist is also a battle within the struggle to reclaim sovereignty over one's own soul. In the great myths, the hero is always called to descend into the underworld, to confront the monsters and phantoms that dwell in the dark. The empath's journey is no different. To see the narcissist as they are is to recognize with growing clarity the ways in which one has been enchanted by the promise of love, ensnared by the fear of abandonment, trapped by the hope that this time things will be different. It is to admit without shame that we have all longed for rescue, all yearned for a love that will heal what was wounded long ago. But if the narcissist is the shadow king, then the empath is the exiled queen or prince, the rightful ruler who must reclaim the throne not through violence or vengeance, but through self-knowledge and compassion. This is the work of individuation, the slow and often painful process by which we integrate the lost and wounded parts of ourselves, weaving them into the tapestry of a new, more authentic life in dreams. This integration may appear as the recovery of a lost child, the discovery of a hidden room, or the healing of a wound that has festered for years. Each image is a step on the journey home. It is essential to realize that true healing cannot be achieved by simply rejecting the narcissist, by casting them out of our lives and out of our psyches. For in doing so, we risk exiling parts of ourselves as well, perpetuating the very fragmentation we seek to heal. The task is not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it, to recognize its wisdom as well as its danger, its power as well as its pain. The narcissist's gift, if we dare to accept it, is the opportunity to confront the places in ourselves that have been disowned, to embrace the fullness of our own humanity. And what of love? The empath, whose heart is tuned to the suffering of the world, may fear that the price of awakening is the loss of compassion, the end of tenderness. But this is not so. Rather, the journey through the darkness refines love, tempers it with discernment and wisdom. Where once the empath gave indiscriminately, now they can offer their heart with boundaries. Where once they sought to save, now they can simply be present, holding the suffering of others without losing themselves in the process. This is not a retreat from the world, but a deeper engagement with it. For when the empath is no longer compelled to seek healing in the wounds of others, they are free to bring their gifts to the world in new and creative ways. Their sensitivity, once a source of pain, becomes a wellspring of intuition and insight. Their compassion, once entangled in the dramas of others, becomes an anchor for authentic connection. The narcissist, once seen as the source of all suffering, is recognized as a fellow traveler, struggling with their own wounds and shadows. In the end, the true revelation is not simply that the narcissist is what they are, but that the empath is too a being of light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, longing and fulfillment. The encounter with the narcissist becomes, in this way, a sacred initiation, a passage through the valley of suffering that leads, at last, to the mountain top of self-knowledge. And yet, the journey is never complete. The psyche, like the universe, is infinite in its unfolding. Each revelation opens onto new mysteries. Each healing gives birth to new questions. But in the light of this new awareness, the empath can walk the path of life with a greater sense of purpose and peace, no longer seeking rescue or redemption in the faces of others, but carrying within themselves the seeds of their own wholeness, led to the rest. For a moment, in this quiet certainty, the work is not easy, nor is it finished, but the soul, having glimpsed the truth, cannot return to blindness. There will be times of sorrow, to be sure. There will be moments when the old patterns threaten to reassert themselves, but the light, once kindled, is not so easily extinguished. In the darkest night, it burns with the quiet insistence of the self, guiding the traveler onward, ever deeper into the mysteries of love and suffering, hope and despair, loss and return. The empath, having seen, is forever changed. The narcissist, too, is no longer merely an enemy, but a symbol, a teacher, a warning, a mirror. And in this new vision, the world itself is transformed, for the ultimate truth is this: what we seek in others can only be found within. The journey is ours alone to walk, and the path, though winding and perilous, leads always toward the light. What the conscious mind rarely comprehends, but the soul eternally recognizes, is that every encounter, no matter how painful, serves as a messenger from the depths, bearing gifts concealed within adversity. When the empath finally sees, not merely with the eyes, but with the ancient gaze of the inner spirit, something profound shifts. The world tilts on its axis, and suddenly the long shadows cast by old illusions begin to take on new forms, like dream images, slowly resolving from chaos into meaning. The outer drama that once consumed every waking thought and hope becomes, almost imperceptibly, a living symbol of something larger at work within. I have often observed, in the subtle theater of the analytic hour, the way in which the soul strives for wholeness through the most circuitous of means. We are not rational creatures, though we desperately wish to be. The empath's attachment to the narcissist is not a simple error of judgment, but a summons issued by the psyche to reenact a primordial myth, the longing for union, the descent into the underworld, the confrontation with the shadow, and the hope of return. The narcissist becomes a dark initiator, pulling the empath across thresholds that reason alone would never cross. In the agony of heartbreak and the bewilderment of betrayal, the seed of transformation is sown. To witness the narcissist's true nature is to be delivered abruptly from the trance of projection. The spell is broken, But the first sensation is rarely liberation. It is often terror, emptiness, a vertigo of meaning. Who am I, if not the rescuer, the healer, the sacrificer? If all I have poured forth finds no echo, if the well into which I have thrown my heart is bottomless, then what remains of me? In this moment, the soul shudders in the void, stripped of its former identity, poised on the brink of the great unknown. It is here that the work truly begins, not with the rejection of the narcissist, nor with the condemnation of one's own weakness, but with the willingness to linger in the emptiness and listen for the voice that whispers from beneath all disappointment. In dreams, this is often represented by vast, empty landscapes, deserts beneath black skies, endless seas beneath a moon that offers no reflection. The dreamer wanders, searching for water, for warmth, for signs of life. These are not images of despair, but of initiation, signaling that the ego has been dislodged from its habitual certainties and must now learn to trust the intelligence of the unconscious. The narcissist, stripped of their glamour, becomes a guide to the underworld. The empath, stripped of their illusions, becomes a pilgrim, forced at last to undertake the journey that all must one day make, the journey inward. And as with all true pilgrimages, the road is fraught with peril and with promise. The shadow rises, at times monstrous, at times seductive, tempting the soul to return to old patterns, to retreat into self-blame, or to seek new objects of longing. But beneath these temptations stirs something older, still a longing for integration, for reunion with the lost self. Here, one encounters the deepest paradox. The very qualities that drew the empath to the narcissist, their capacity for love, for attunement, for suffering, are not flaws, but seeds of the self, seeking expression. The problem has never been in the feeling, but in its direction, in the sacrifice of the inner world to the insatiable hunger of the outer. The task, then, is not to harden the heart, nor to extinguish compassion, but to return it to its rightful source. As the ancient alchemists knew, the greatest gold is found in the darkest earth. The water of life flows only when the vessel is broken and remade. This turning inward does not happen in a moment. It is an act of patience, of faithful returning to oneself, day after day, wound after wound. In dreams, the narcissist may reappear not as an enemy, but as a wounded child, a lost animal, or a cryptic figure bearing a lantern through the dark. The empath, now awake to the symbolism, can greet these images not with fear, but with curiosity, asking, what in me needs to be seen? What part of myself have I abandoned in my pursuit of the unreachable other? What do I truly hunger for? Now that the old hunger is revealed as unquenchable, it is here that individuation, that most mysterious of psychological journeys, assumes its rightful place. For individuation is not the creation of a self isolated from the world, but the unfolding of a self attuned to the totality of its own depths, shadow and light, wound and gift, longing and fulfillment, the narcissist has served their part as catalyst. Now the work shifts to the homecoming of the soul. As one turns inward, the old dreams of rescue and fusion begin to dissolve. The empath, so long accustomed to losing themselves in another story, discovers new rooms within their own house, rooms of solitude, of play, of power, untainted by the need for approval. This may at first feel lonely, even frightening, for the echo of the narcissist's absence is loud and the old hunger persists. But if one can endure the silence, something miraculous happens. The lost child returns, the voice that was silenced begins to speak, and the images of the unconscious reveal themselves as guides, not tormentors. I remember in my own explorations of the psyche how often the gods of antiquity appeared in dream and vision. Hermes, the trickster guide, Persephone, the queen of the underworld, Orpheus, who risked everything for a glimpse of his lost love. These are not mere fictions, but living presences, archetypes that shape our destinies, whether we acknowledge them or not. In the encounter with the narcissist, the empath meets their own Persephone moment, the descent, the loss, the negotiation with shadow forces. But as with all true myths, the descent is not the end. There is a return, a rebirth, a claiming of gifts wrested from the darkness. This is why, in the aftermath of awakening, the world does not simply revert to its former shape. The empath who has seen cannot unsee. They may grieve, may rage, may feel the ache of emptiness for a season, but gradually, imperceptibly, the axis of their life shifts from the compulsive orbit around another's needs to a deeper alignment with their own center. They begin to sense the guidance of the self, a subtle but unbreakable thread weaving through every dream, every encounter, every moment of solitude. Integration, as I have often said, is not perfection, but wholeness. It does not require the eradication of pain, nor the silencing of longing, but the acceptance of all that is darkness as well as light, wound as well as wisdom. The narcissist, once seen as destroyer, is now recognized as messenger. The empath, once lost in longing, is found in presence. The suffering that once seemed meaningless is transmuted into understanding, compassion, and a quiet joy that no outer validation can touch. And so the journey continues, not as a repetition of old patterns, but as a spiral of ever-deepening awareness. The empath, now an initiate in their own mystery, may still feel the tug of old shadows, the echo of old wounds, but they know now that the way is inward, that every encounter is a mirror, every relationship a crucible. The world, seen with awakened eyes, is alive with meaning. The symbols of dream and waking life become guides rather than puzzles. And the dance of love and suffering gives way to the deeper dance of soul and destiny. There is, finally, a kind of grace that descends upon the one who has endured this passage. It is not the grace of innocence, nor the security of certainty, but the serenity that comes from having met the darkness and survived. The empath, forged in the crucible of their own longing, emerges not as a victim nor as a savior, but as a soul among souls wounded. Yes, but also whole. They move through the world with a new gentleness, a humility born of suffering, and a power rooted not in the conquest of others, but in the embrace of their own shadow. If you find yourself on this journey, if you have seen at last the face behind the mask and felt your own illusions shatter, take heart. You are not alone. This path is ancient, winding through the forests of myth and the corridors of dream. The soul has walked it for millennia, and every step you take is honored by those who have gone before. There will be days of darkness and nights of longing, but also moments of radiant clarity, when the whole world seems to sing with the music of your own becoming. Trust the process, trust the symbols, trust the wisdom that arises from your own depths. The narcissist has played their part in your story. Now the task is to write your own. As you do, you will discover that the self mysterious, inexhaustible, divine was always waiting for you, beneath the masks and the mirrors, ready to guide you home. There is a quiet hour, often before the dawn, when the soul, having traversed the inner labyrinth, sits beside its own shadow and finds, to its astonishment, a kind of peace. The wounds that once defined the world, those invisible scars traced by longing and disappointment, are no longer merely sites of pain, but portals through which a new wisdom flows. The empath, who has seen the narcissist as they are, and not as they once hoped them to be, arrives not at bitterness, but at the threshold, trembling with both sorrow and possibility. And on this threshold, the real journey begins. The journey of living in conscious relation with one's own depths, no longer in flight from the shadow, but in partnership with it. How then to proceed? The mind will always search for instructions, steps, methods, guarantees, but the soul's movement is subtler, its transformations more mysterious. If you have walked with me thus far, I invite you now to linger, to breathe, and to listen, not for the clamor of outer demands, but for the gentle, persistent murmur of your own inner world. For in the aftermath of awakening, what matters most is not to fix or to strive or even to understand, but to be present to what arises moment by moment in the silent dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. You may find in the weeks and months to come that old memories surface, fragments of childhood, half-remembered dreams, moments of joy or terror that once seemed trivial, now illuminated with meaning. Do not turn away. Welcome these images as emissaries from the depth, each bearing a fragment of your lost story. Perhaps you will recognize the wounded child gazing through a window of longing. Perhaps you will sense the presence of an ancient guardian watching over you with a patience older than time. Let these inner figures speak. Listen to their grief and their wisdom, their anger and their hope. They are you, and you are them. You may notice, too, the temptation to fill the silence with new distractions, new rescues, new dramas. This, too, is the psyche's way of avoiding the rawness of true encounter. But if you can resist the compulsion to rush, to move on, to wrap your pain in premature closure, you will discover a rare and transformative gift, the capacity to remain with yourself as you are, without judgment or abandonment. In that sacred space, the soul begins to mend. Wholeness is not achieved through the denial of suffering, but through its inclusion, through the willingness to hold all that you are without shrinking or splitting. Let dreams be your companions now. Each night, as you cross the threshold of sleep, ask your soul for guidance, for images, for messages from the unconscious. Write them down upon waking. No matter how strange or trivial they seem, over time you may begin to discern patterns, symbols, recurring themes. You may meet the narcissist again, not as a tormentor, but as a symbol, a shadow figure, a fragment of your own unintegrated longing. Let these encounters teach you. Let them reveal where you are still bound and where you are free. The language of dream is not literal, but living each image a clue to the next stage of your unfolding. Consider in waking life the relationships that come to you now. Notice when the old hunger stirs, when the urge to rescue or to merge arises. Do not condemn yourself. Do not seek to eradicate feeling, for it is your greatest ally. Instead, pause and turn your attention inward. What does this longing ask of me? What part of myself am I trying to reclaim through the other in these moments? You are invited to practice what I have called active imagination, that sacred dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious in which new possibilities are born. Close your eyes, breathe into your body, and let the images arise. Speak with them, ask them what they need, what they fear, what they hope for. Record what emerges, not as a script for action, but as a map of your soul's terrain. If you are able, set aside regular times for solitude, for silence, for simple presence with yourself. Walk in nature and let the outer landscape mirror your inner one. Notice the patterns of shadow and light, the slow unfolding of life through cycles of birth and decay. Let your heart soften to the rhythms of the world. Everything you need to know about healing is inscribed in the living earth. Patience, resilience, transformation. The daffodil does not rush its blooming. The tree does not curse its fallen leaves. All unfolds in its own time, according to a wisdom that precedes thought and intention. As you live in this new way, you may find that forgiveness arises not as an obligation, nor as a denial of harm, but as a gentle release of the bondage of resentment. To forgive is not to forget, nor to condone, but to free oneself from the endless repetition of old injuries. The narcissist, too, was shaped by wounds unseen, by histories unknown. In seeing them clearly, you are invited to see yourself the ways in which your own wounds have governed your choices, your attachments, your sorrows. Compassion, when it comes, is not sentimental. It is clear-eyed, fierce, and liberating. It is the recognition that we are all wanderers in the labyrinth, each searching for the thread that will lead us home. Above all, trust the slow work of transformation. Individuation is not a goal to be achieved, but a process to be lived, a lifelong unfolding in which each day brings new opportunities for integration and meaning. There will be setbacks, relapses, moments of doubt and despair. Let these too have their place in your story. The shadow does not disappear with a single act of insight. It recedes, returns, reshapes itself as the psyche grows. The task is not to conquer the darkness, but to befriend it, to discover within it the seeds of your own becoming. And so, as our time together draws to a close, I invite you to step gently into your own mystery. Let the question of who you are remain open, alive, and fertile. Let the images of dream and waking guide you, surprise you, wonder you. Let the old pain soften into wisdom. Let the old longing transmute into creativity, into love that no longer clings or saves, but blesses and sets free. In the end, there is no simple path, no doctrine, no map that can replace the authority of your own experience. The unconscious is vast, inexhaustible, ever renewing. Each day it invites you deeper, to risk a new encounter, to dream a new dream. If you find yourself lost, remember this. The labyrinth is not a prison, but a path. Every turn, every dead end, every encounter with the Minotaur is a part of your journey toward the center. And at the center waits not a monster, but the self, the radiant, unbroken wholeness that has always been your birthright. Trust the darkness, trust the journey, trust the light that flickers even in the deepest night. As you leave this hall, carry with you the memory of our time together, not as a lesson to be memorized, but as a living invitation. Dare to enter your own depths. Dare to welcome the shadow. Dare to love what you find, and to let it change you. For in this courage lies the seed of all transformation, the quiet miracle of becoming whole.